Councillors, we okay to start?
Yes.
Okay, good. Morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. We've got an apology from Provost Bissett, the chair of today's meeting. So before we start, the first thing we need to do is appoint a chair for the meeting. So can I ask if any members of the committee have any nominations they wish to make?
Can I nominate Alf Kelly?
Second that.
Thank you. Is that in agreement with the committee?
Agreed.
In which case, I'll just ask Councillor Kelly to come up to the top table. So there'll be a short delay while we just get set.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, welcome to the first scrutiny meeting of 2025, and we'll start with apologies, please.
As previously said, we've got an apology from Provost Bissett. We've also got an apology from Deputy Provost Balfour and Councillor Robertson. Councillor Brown has indicated she will be joining us, but she'll be slightly delayed, so she'll join during the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Any declarations of interest? Just for clarity, members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. No? Sorry, you can say something, no? Right. The minute of the previous Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 3rd of December 2024. Can we record that as an accurate representation of it? Yep.
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. The rolling action log.
Thanks, Convener. The action log, as you know, is a record of actions which the committee has asked for follow-up reports. There are two which came from the December meeting on the roads performance and the building maintenance division. These aren't expected to come to the committee until the December meeting, so we're obviously early into that request. They're noted as in progress, and they will come to that meeting as expected.
Thanks, Brian. Move on to service performance. Council Plan Mid-Year Public Performance Report 24-25 from the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Convener. Morning, everyone. I'll just briefly introduce this mid-year report, and I'd start off by saying that I'm very grateful for all the work done by colleagues to bring together the performance report. There's a lot of information in this, a lot of data and tables and performance analysis across the three council plan priorities. I just want to recognise all the work that's gone into to get us to that point. It is the mid-year report, so there is quite a lot of data that's not available in terms of annual measures, and that's set out in paragraph 5.6. But I still think there's a lot of valuable information here. And Appendix 1 sets out the current performance management framework, so that's Falco Performs, and Appendix 2 has the detailed performance information for the mid-year point for 24-25. I'm sure members will have questions about some of that detail. Before we go on to that, I just wanted to say something about the wider context. So members will recall that when we got our best value report last year, May last year, the report was pretty positive about the council's improved approach to performance reporting, but it did also recognise that we still had a journey to go on in terms of performance reporting. And I suppose reflecting on the report that's in front of you today, I still think we do have work to do, and I just wanted to say something about that. So we've developed the Falco Performance approach that's set out in Appendix 1. Some of you will be familiar with the information that's set out on the Council's website, where there's quite a lot of detail, and I think that our auditors have spoken quite positively about that. However, I still feel that we need to develop a better narrative alongside this about our overall performance in relation to the achievement of the Council Plan priorities, the progress towards financial sustainability, transformation and improvement. So I don't think reading the report you get a really clear overall sense. You got a lot of detail, but you don't yet have that really strong overall sense. So that's something that collectively we feel we need to do a bit more on. And of course, we always need to be aiming to drive improvement and address areas of underperformance. So we want these to stand out very clearly in the context of the report. I think also that it's, I hope that by the time we get to the end of year report, we'll have that greater sense of overall progress and a clear narrative. And in that context, I'm very mindful that the Accounts Commission has just, at the end of December, published a new SPI statutory direction. So that is the direction from the Accounts Committee that sets out the requirements placed upon us in terms of performance and performance reporting. And it talks about performance reporting being balanced and timely and accessible. And we need to ensure that we're meeting all three of these. And I think in terms of perhaps particularly accessibility, we've just got a bit more work to be done on that. And I think as we look at the next stages in terms of our performance reporting, that SPI statutory direction is a good starting point. It's very clear about the Accounts Commission's expectations in terms of our use of the local government benchmarking framework, using a balance of that and local indicators. So we will, when it comes to the next report, I think endeavour to have that rather fuller picture in the context of the new direction. So I'm really happy myself and colleagues to take questions either on that broader sense of direction or more specifically on what's set out in front of you today. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Mr. Lowry. Can we start with many of the successes measures noted in the report? Some of the data is unavailable. What's the impact of this limited data and the quality of the reporting? How is it going to be managed going forward? The committee have concerns regarding this. The Council Plan for the year 24, quarter 4 public performance report was presented to the committee in June 24, where the lack of available data was also raised as a concern by the committee. The Director of Transformation Communities and Corporate Services advised this was due to timescales and issues relating to the collation of the data. She confirmed that a planned delay in the reporting data would address this issue. Could you enlighten us on what's going on in that?
Can I perhaps make a couple of comments first, and I'll pass over to Karen. I mean, I'm very acutely aware of this because on behalf of Solace, which is the Chief Executive Group, I chair the Local Government Benchmarking Framework Board for Scotland, and that issue about timeliness is one that we're always acutely aware of. And the fact is that some of the things that are really important to measure and are set out in the Local Government Benchmarking Framework simply aren't available on a regular basis. But I suppose what we're trying to do, and we now have monthly updates of the Local Government Benchmarking Framework, which are published with data that can be produced on a more regular basis. But it is something of a struggle, that. But the reason why it's important to have some local indicators as well is that gives us then the ability to choose indicators which we can actually look at on a more regular basis. The disadvantage of local indicators is we don't have that ability to compare performance with other councils. And of course, that process of comparison is one way we can identify weaknesses and drive improvement. I don't know if Karen wants to add to that.
Karen.
Thank you, Convener. Convener, the only thing to add would be that the full data set has been issued this year on all of the data that was outstanding. So that was our Q4 update report, and that has been issued. It's also been published on our Falkirk Performance website. So although there was data missing for the reasons Kenneth outlined in the original report back in July, we have since issued all of that data. I think it's also worth saying that as services, whilst that cross-council benchmarking isn't available and we don't have the data available for here, officers do monitor their performance on a regular basis to make sure that performance is still managed in an appropriate way. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So if we move on now to, is there anybody got any other questions on that? Is it? Oh, Councillor McCabe.
Thanks, Convener. Yep. The first reading of the report, I've got concerns with it, and I appreciate what the Chief Executive has just advised us and Karen. Some of these details, that the data that we're talking about, we raised this back in June of 24, and we were advised that some of the data wouldn't be available until later on. Cam's just alluded to that data is now available. Unfortunately, that doesn't help us in our scrutiny role within the scrutiny committee here. It was interesting to hear Kenneth say, chairing the Solus meeting, where this issue, this problem of providing data at the right time is a problem. I actually think that we highlighted back in June of 24, where there was this problem that we didn't have data available then, and the committee meeting, I think it was suggested, could we potentially be moving the dates of the committee meeting so that this data would be available, so as we wouldn't get come along to further meetings where the data wasn't available again. It just seems to be a recurring problem, and I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from Kenneth if Solus have come up with any suggestion as to how we overcome this, because it is critical to us. I'll pick up on a few other points. Maybe if I could just ask Mr. Laurie to, through you, Convener. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. So in terms of our reporting to this committee, we're relying, for example, in relation to LGBF, for the publication of the data for all councils, and particularly in the last couple of years. Some of that's been delayed because of the problems which you might be aware about in terms of audit in various councils and delayed audit. It's really a post-pandemic issue to a degree. But I think the way we deal with it in terms of the end of year report, if we bring it into a September scrutiny meeting, then all of that data will be available, or 99% of it anyway. So that gets away from the issue of the end of year report being incomplete. And as Karen said, the full report was subsequently issued. In terms of the mid-year report, we're always going to have an issue with the availability of data, because a number of the indicators, because of their nature, are only available at the end of the year. They only have the measures at the end of the year. So the mid-year report is always going to have a number of gaps. I think that's unavoidable. I think in terms of the presentation of that, the question in my mind is whether, if we don't have the most recent data, if we reproduce the most recently available data. Now, I think the advantage of that is you have something in front of you that gives you a sense of where we are. The disadvantage, you then have a report which has data relating to different periods. But I think particularly in the context of the new Accounts Commission direction, that's the kind of question we just want to think about a bit more, so that when the end of year report comes, it's as full as it can be. And when we're doing the mid-year report, we're thinking about what the best mitigation is for the fact that not all the information will be available.
Thank you, Kenneth. Councillor Binney.
Thank you. Basically, as we know, scrutiny, we all know scrutiny is detailed examination of what's written in the report. And I appreciate you saying that not all the data's obviously in the report at the moment, because it's only sort of mid-year report. I totally understand that. But I have a detailed question about 4.6, and that's regarding the success measures. But in this case, you're stating successful completion of targeted work. However, I'm reading this does not provide evidence of improvement. And again, I hate to say this is due to lack of data. I mean, take, for example, you're stating the sleep-limited behaviours, vaping, energy drinks, and screen time. I mean, I would like to know, as a mother and a grandmother, how is this being combated? Because I still see this as a big issue in society still. So again, going back to data, can you provide the data that supports this, and what measures or processes can you make this sustainable? Meaning, if children have come off vaping, energy drinks, how are we supporting them in the future to stay off these items? That's my first question. Thank you.
You would like to answer that one, John?
Thank you, Councillor Binney. I mean, these were time-limited research projects that were taking place in schools with a variety of different partners to inform schools of the habits and the findings, and to then work with parents and support staff who it may apply to. Obviously, it doesn't apply to all children across our estate, but and the advice and the techniques and the strategies would then be a matter for staff to follow up in school with particular identified young people.
Yes, I do understand that, but it's for councillors here at this committee to understand that, what was the techniques, and for us to understand that and to see the improvements. And in this case, I don't have any data, like it was 100 children, was it 10 children, that sort of thing. So I don't know, maybe we could get a wee update for that in future, maybe to come back to the Scrutiny Committee, just so that we understand it a little bit better and to see the improvements, considering that it's not successful completion of this targeted work, if you don't mind. I do have another question. Can I ask it this time? It's quite a short question on the success measures.
Yeah, on you go, yeah.
Right, it's on page 73, and it's about the crisis grant applications. And this is an area of concern. And I believe CMT have discussed performance improvement plans on 2 separate dates, on the 18th of November and the 18th of December. I would like to know the outcome of that, because really, for me, as a councillor, I don't think that's satisfactory, because it's a crisis and people in our community, deserve an outcome, a decision if they're applying for a crisis loan. So I would like a wee update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Binney. Karen?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Convener, the work that we've done on the crisis grant is related to an overall review we've done with the Scottish Welfare Fund, of which the crisis grant is part of. Now, this was a new process that we conducted with the Improvement Service, and it was a complete peer review where we had other councils in assessing who were performing very well in this area, assessing areas where we could make changes and improve performance. So you can see in the data that's there, some of the grant decisions, when you look at the old stats and the new stats, there are some improvements, but there are a lot of recommendations that we've still to work through as a result of that peer review, which was extremely helpful in terms of giving us an action plan to take forward and make sure we can improve performance in this area. So we have reported to CMT on the recommendations from that review. We will be reporting back in spring to show the progress we've made, and further on in the year we will get our national data then to enable us to make an assessment of how well we're doing on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. You happy with that, Councillor Binney?
Yes, I'm just a wee bit concerned about the timescales and think about a community and people applying for crisis loans, crisis grants, I should say. So I don't know if that can be improved on in the interim, even though we've got these recommendations and it's coming back, because I would think if you've got a crisis in your home, 6 months is a very long time. I don't know if you would agree on that.
Karen?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Indeed, if the importance of dealing with some of these issues is the timeliness of dealing with them, I absolutely accept that point. And that's absolutely why we undertook the peer review, because we wanted to learn from others who were doing well in this area. And that's about how do we turn around decisions on the crisis grants, for example, within 24 hours. That's the sort of timescale that we're looking at. But equally, the community support grants, how do we do them quicker as well? So all of that is seeing improvements as a result of the work already that we've done with the peer review. So we have seen some improvements, but we want further improvements. And as I say, we'll be reporting back to CMT in the spring. But it will flow into this report at a future date in terms of the overall data we've got. Thanks.
Thank you.
Before I go further, can we ask one question at a time? Because sometimes other people want to come back in on the same question. Councillor Flynn.
Yep, excuse me. Thank you, Convener. Excuse the voice. It's a wee bit husky today. I've 3 areas I'd like to look at. I could actually spend quite a long time in that. The first one really is more a clarification. Page 49, the enablers, it gives a lot of numbers and targets, etc. There'd be 2 things really useful here. One would be in the blank column, refer to a page or a report which expands, and I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But my main question for whomever is, what is the relevance of some of these numbers? Are these the same numbers that every council is using? You know, and I take a random example, cost per library visit, £4.50. Now, is that more relevant than the relevance of the cost of a library service? In other words, I tend to go into the Larbert Library maybe 5-10 times a month, you know, so am I reducing that cost by going there? So I'm interested in that aspect of all this. What is the actual relevance of these numbers? You know, does that make sense? That's my first question. Thanks, Convener.
Sir Larry.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Flynn. These are all local government benchmarking framework measures, so they apply to all councils. So that these are ones which we can compare results with other councils, and that can be valuable because we see actually very significant variation, for example, in terms of cost per library visit, and then it's that information then allows you to open up a series of questions about why that might be and what others are doing in terms of their promoting or developing their library service. But I do agree with your initial point. I think the table just with the target and no other information isn't as helpful as if we did have related information. That really ties back to the point I was making in my introduction about our review of performance reporting and how we take it forward.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thanks, Convener. My next question really, the first one is sports and leisure really. And my first question is straightforward. With all our sports and leisure venues, are the attendees, the people that go into it, accurately measured by some electronic system? Sorry.
Michael, can you please?
Yes, Councillor, through you, Councillor Flynn. Obviously, we have our members and those who attend the leisure centres across the authority area. Just for your information, we are introducing barriers to ensure we have much better and accurate information of attendees, numbers and profiles of the individuals who come into our leisure centre. So it's an area we are looking at improving, but we do have quite robust and good detail at this point in time, but looking to improve that through the introduction of barriers, particularly the Mariner Centre is the first place we're going to introduce these barriers to provide us much better information on the level and numbers coming into our facilities.
So from what you're saying, Michael, it is that it's not 100% accurate at the moment. The reason I raised the question, I was on the Community Trust for 6 years or whatever, and one of the things that shocked me was Grangemouth Sports Centre, but the numbers that they calculated went through the door was done by the reception staff. So if there's a swimming gala and 200 people came in, a receptionist, he or she said, oh, well, hang on a minute, that's 200 people or whatever. And to me, that was totally unacceptable because there's no point in having numbers. But if you're saying that you're improving the technology and you're sort of getting there, then that makes a lot of sense because otherwise it skews the data, doesn't it? You know?
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. My second...
could you just, sorry. Is there anyone else got any questions on that? If we take a question at a time, then it gives other members of the committee a chance to jump in there. But, no.
Okay. Am I the only one, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to my second last point. Let's see now. I was looking at page 58. Sorry, is someone else talking? No. No, it's okay. Looking at the income and the targets, which I fully accept, but however, when you look at the increase in income, and this is not a reflection on the excellent work that the teams and managers and all the staff are doing, so it's no reflection on that whatsoever. However, we're exceeding the targets, but the annual target really is staying the same at quite an achievable rate. Now, I've been in sales prior to being a councillor for 30-40 years, and I've had targets, budgets and that coming out my years, and whenever you achieve a target you review it and either up it. Very rarely do you reduce it, but you certainly up it. So I'm questioning the target there, and it would apply to some other places as well, of 5.5 million when already in Q2 we've achieved 3.04. If all that makes sense, convener?
Thank you. Yeah. Michael. Oh, Michael, please.
Yep, thank you. Through you, convener, Councillor Flynn. Absolutely correct. You know, as we progress and make improvements to our service and bring in and generate greater income for the service. So, for example, as we put our fees and charges up, as we did last year for various different activities across sport and leisure, we achieved greater income. So you'll see the target has increased, and I suspect going forward next year we'll be looking to increase that target even further. We have a number of conversations with senior officers about making sure we stretch those targets as we understand the financial pressures the council is in. So as we are progressing fees and charges, we'll be looking to increase them to make sure we stretch our targets and adjust the targets accordingly.
Okay, no, thank you. I mean, they have to be achievable at the same time stretching, and you've already mentioned that one. Thank you. I'm allowed one more question, Convener. I don't want to cut across anyone else.
If you just hold off a minute, Councillor Aitchison's got a question here.
Thank you, Michael, for your answer. Can I just ask, with the increase in fees and charges and targets and the things, do you have any data if that's affected the number of people attending these facilities?
Through you, convener, obviously very much depends on the particular facility, its location and functions within it. So it's there are variations across the local authority area. We do have quite a lot of detailed data on specific, gymnasiums or pools, etc. So I don't have these figures to hand, but I certainly can provide members the detailed figures should they require them. But it does vary right across the board, and you're right, as you change our pricing structure, for example, you would have an impact on participation, but we are finding that despite some of the increases, the participation is very healthy across our estate. We also need to be very mindful of the customer experience. So if we have, for example, in gymnasiums which are doing well at this point in time, if they become overcrowded, that experience is less pleasant for members of our community, so they stop coming. So there's always a kind of balance we strike between making sure we have really good participation across the area, making sure we fully utilise our assets within our facilities and price accordingly. So it's an ongoing balancing act we need to perform to make sure we have as much access to make sure our community has much access to our facilities as possible and price it accordingly.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I would still quite like to see some figures on the attendance at some sports centres and facilities if that was possible, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, Michael. Will you come back with these figures again?
Sorry, Councillor Kelly, you froze on me there in Teams. So the request was to come back with the figures on participation rates. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn, want to come up with your next question?
Yeah, final point. Page 60, participatory budgeting or community choices in Falkirk Council. Back from my memory, 2017, or maybe even earlier, but the Scottish Government recommended or suggested that councils give 1% of their budget to participatory budgeting and increasing that over the years to 5%. Now, realistically, with the pressures on the economy, etc., 5% was never going to be achievable. But on the face of it, I'm extremely disappointed to see that we allocate 0.01% of our budget against a target of 1%. Now, this, in my mind, impacts on local communities who have various projects and different things. I would like some explanation on why we're missing that target, because that is, in my mind, a lot of money and a lot of projects that could be given to communities. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. I think it's Karen.
Thank you, Convener. Convener, as you'll see in the body of the report, there is some information there which sets out that the figure that we've got for Q2 is based on the actual spend from the Community Choices Grant. So there will be further spend during this financial year, and that's still to flow through into the performance report. But it's a fair point, Councillor Flynn, that we are not achieving that 1% target. And for 23-24, although it was at 0.6%, it still wasn't at the 1% level. So there is work that's being ongoing around how we can improve on that figure. It will take time because it obviously looks at how we allocate budgets to our communities to spend. One of the options that we did consider more recently was for housing spend. Some of that will come forward to members in the report later in January, but there are other areas that we're looking at through an approach of ward-based budgeting, where we're looking at our spend in each of the different wards. So through that process, we would hopefully be able to introduce new mechanisms that would enable us to improve on that level of participation. Thanks. Okay, thank you. I'd look forward to seeing that. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. You're welcome, Mr. Flynn.
Convener, could I just ask a follow on, just with my understanding, then through the Convener. When we say our target is 1%, appreciate that it will vary when that's actually spent, because obviously it does depend on the timing of successful applications. But do we sort of ring fence that money? So each year we say we've got 1%, and if that hadn't actually been distributed, if you like, within that year, does that get held? Or is it just, if it doesn't happen, it sort of, I don't know, melts into the main budget, or where does the money go, in other words? Just to sort of see, so I think it's very much a timing issue as well as an encouragement for locals to put forward valid plans.
Convener, yeah, happy to pick that up. The Community Choices budget, that flows into future years. So anything we had spent would flow into future years. So that's specifically Community Choices, which was very much ring fenced for that purpose. When it comes to wider budgets, that would simply sit within the budget, and it would be for communities to make a decision on where it's spent. But we need to do more work to get to that stage. We're very early doors at that one at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yvonne, next question. Sorry. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, Convener. Could I just pick up a point on Councillor Aitchison's inquiry about participation? And if you go to page 59, you'll see that participation levels within sport and leisure are currently ahead of target. So they've achieved their they're in excess of the halfway target before the end of the second quarter. So in my view, that shows that the fees and charges currently set across the estate are not having a negative impact on performance, because we're actually exceeding target. If Councillor Aitchison would like to specify maybe some of the venues that he'd like that additional information, then obviously I'm very happy to supply that. I guess we have quite a lot of venues, and I don't know if Councillor Aitchison or the committee in general is wanting to see every single venue up and down, or if there's specific ones that more information would be required.
I think really, Malcolm, if we could even have a benchmark comparing against 5 years ago. I do want figures for 2021 or 22, which we seem to get quite a lot, which figures were completely skewed because of the pandemic. But even if we have a attendance from 2019 to current levels or something, it gives something to gauge it against whether attendance is better or worse or whatever else. I'm not really asking for any specific venues or such, but if in general, for even if just swimming pools or gymnasiums or either, you know what I mean. I'm not.
Yeah, no, very happy to provide that. So we'll take that, and we'll circulate that to the whole committee.
That'd be great. Yeah, with it. Next question.
Thanks, Convener. A number of questions, but just before I do, I'd just like to close out my concerns that I had with the data that I felt wasn't in the report. Mr. Laurie's explained a good deal of why we haven't got that, and I totally accept that. Where I'm, just to close out, where I get a wee bit concerned, and I'm just throwing this out here to ask if there's any value in it, or maybe we shouldn't be doing it. It's if we have a look at page 18, paragraph 5.6.3, from the data available. We're extrapolating information, but we're basically ignoring 40 required indicators that we don't have. I just wonder, is there any value in that, Kenneth? As you say, this is a mid-year report, a mid-term report. Is there any real value extrapolating that out? Do we get anything from it?
Thank you, Convener. So I think the majority of these 4-tier local government benchmarking framework indicators, so you won't get to the year end. And I suppose what we have here is at 5.6.3 in the table above it is an attempt to say, well, on the basis of what we do have, this is what performance is looking like. But at the end of the year, we will have all that information. We will have information for every indicator. And I think at that point, and it goes back to my comments at the beginning of the meeting, really, I think we just need to explore that a bit more in the report and draw some conclusions about both overall level of performance, but also being really clear about where we think performance isn't good enough and we need to do more. And that's, from my perspective, certainly from, as chief executive, I want to know that if there's areas that are where performance is below what we would expect or below comparator councils, what are we going to do about it? That's the really important thing. Because ultimately, if we can demonstrate that we're performing well across these range of indicators, that will mean better outcomes for communities as well. So I think there's limitations on the mid-year reporting. I still think it's important that this committee gets 2 reports a year so they can give consideration to what's happening, but we can do something fuller at the year end.
No, that's fine, Kenneth. What I was getting at is, there are 40 LGBFs which we don't have the data for. The 40, they could be very good, which raises up our percentage. They could be awful, which brings our percentage down. I was just wondering if you felt there was a value in it. You do, and I'm perfectly happy to accept that. Yeah, thanks. If I can ask a few questions, convener. Thank you. Page 21. It's to do with town centre vacancy rates. This is one of the 3 measures that in priority 3 that are not achieving target. I'm just wondering, how will we specifically address the vacancies in our town centre? I'm talking specifically address vacancies.
Michael?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to take that one. Obviously, town vacancy rates are very fluid measures. On an annual basis, we actually go out and assess and determine how many retail units in particular are lying vacant. We work very closely with a number of developers to look at particularly bringing empty retail units back into use, working very closely with the BID in Falkirk to get more active usages across the estate. Also, we're considering how do we convert upper floors into residential, so bring more people to live in our high streets to increase the footfall, to then encourage more retail. So these measures are factual. We spend a lot of time working with developers and the community, the business community in particular, to try and do our best to fill some of these retail outlets. We also have to recognise that across the UK, retail habits have changed dramatically, as we all know from our own shopping habits, whether we use Amazon or other online retailers, that there's clearly a decline in the retail capacity required within our towns, depending on the demand of the consumers. So repurposing these retail units is clearly important. Another key task we have taken on is clearly by removing the excess capacity within our town. So a good example being the Calendar Square facility. So that 14% number will come down because fundamentally we demolish retail units that are not required. So those figures should improve for Falkirk in particular. But obviously our priority is to try and encourage more and different retailers to come into our town centre to keep and maintain the vibrancy of the town. So it is an important measure. We're continually monitoring it. A number of those retail units we have no control over. They're not owned by the council, so we just have to do our best to work with landlords and other retailers to ensure they are occupied and fully utilised. But that very much depends on the market demand that's out there.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. An excellent answer, with perhaps the only caveat that we don't recommend blitzing the Falkirk Town Centre to get rid of every vacant property. But a good answer. Thank you very much for that. It clears a couple of details up for me. If I can move to page 41, it's to do with affordable housing. It's I suppose the question, I don't know who this question is posed to, whether it's a Falkirk Council question or is it a wider Scottish Government question. But we're looking at a number of additional affordable homes under either new or buyback, and the total is 250, where we currently have 1,271 persons presenting as homeless. So we're never going to meet that demand. I just wonder, what are we doing within Falkirk Council to try and mitigate the issue that we do have with homelessness? I'm aware that later on in the report, the buyback issue, due to budget constraints and whatever, we're now focusing on larger properties to buy back. It leads on to a further wee question. Are we then considering not buying back, say, one or two-roomed accommodations two-bedroom accommodations? Are we concentrating on the larger properties? I'm just looking for a wee bit of feedback on what we're doing to actually target the problem that we do have.
Sorry, Karen.
Thank you, Convener. Yep, there's a number of actions that we're taking. So I'll start maybe just with your specific question about buybacks. We are still looking to have buybacks at all sizes of properties. It's just that the demand for larger properties is more prevalent, so that's where we need to target some of that money. But it's not to say we won't buy one-bedroom flats if that, or houses if that makes sense to the council to try and increase the social housing. In terms of trying to tackle homelessness, I wish I had the answer to that, in all honesty, but there are any number of actions that we are taking to try and alleviate that issue. So we did, as you will be aware, took the very difficult decision to try and increase the turnaround of void properties, for example. We paused our non-emergency repairs, and you'll be well aware of that. Those are being reintroduced this year. So that is in place, but that helped us not increase the number who are presenting homeless. And I can't recall, Councillor McKay, my apologies if you were on the presentation yesterday on our allocations policy, which is coming to executive later this month. That is also aimed at trying to improve homelessness as much as other areas where we need to change that policy. There is no single answer to this, but we also have a big investment programme. So despite the pressures on budget, we are still continuing to do new build properties. Some councils have paused that simply because of the budget pressures. We are continuing to do that. So there are any number of strands of work here. There's no single answer, but I could assure you that all of the teams within housing are acutely aware of the impact of homelessness and the actions that we need to take locally as far as we possibly can to try and alleviate that as much as we can.
Smashing. Again, thanks for the answer. Quite detailed, quite specific. I mean, it was good to hear that we are continuing to look at new builds, and also somewhere within the report here it does say due to budget constraints, you know, we're targeting bigger properties, but it's clear from what you say that, you know, if the smaller properties become available, we're not going to just discount them. That's good to hear.
Barry, have you got another question coming up? Yeah. Just on what you were saying there, see on the first 2 quarters we had 0 new build houses, and then I think it's 70 now, below the target 180. What's the barriers to that?
Convener, that is linked to timing issues. So it's about when the new build is actually available for rent to be available. So we're well away, you know, we're making good progress in terms of the new build programme that members signed off last year. So that is well in play. But there's a timing issue here. So some can flow into maybe, so if it's, let's say they become available in April, it's the following year. So you would see 0 in that particular month, right, but it'd be the following month that they may become available. So it's a timing thing here, just about when they are. But we're on target in terms of the programme agreed last year. And I was just going to come back into Councillor McCabe's question as well to say that we have the 2 housing reports, which includes the housing investment report being presented to council at the end of January, and that sets out the plan for both the new build programme but also the buyback arrangements as well.
That's great, Karen, thank you. Sorry, I'll give you a wee jump now and go to Cardiff. I don't know, Lorna, sorry, Lorna.
Thank you, Convener. It was really, I want to jump in there after Councillor Aitchison and Mr Benny spoke actually, and it was about the usage of the leisure facilities. And you want to understand the big picture. One thing we've not mentioned is actually the Go card, and I think, you know, a lot of residents have one of those. So do we have the data on the usage of people that use the facilities with a Go card? Because I think that's important to understand too in relation to fees and charges with all the facilities within Falkirk Council. So I don't know if that question can be answered.
Michael, I believe
yes, through you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Binney. Certainly we do have all the detail regarding all Go card members. So happy to provide that information to elected members. I think I'll build that into maybe a briefing paper which highlights the participation numbers that Councillor Aitchison asked for, and include within that, if you don't mind, the Go Card participation numbers as well within that one paper, if that's acceptable.
I'm very happy with that, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener.
Okay. Brian, can we go back to Brian now, please?
Thanks, convener. Just two wee queries, just to clarify in my own head here. Page 49, it's the enablers. Where we talk of cost per attendance of sport and leisure facilities at £4.34, and the cost of parks and open spaces per 1,000 of the population. If you divide that down, that gets you the cost of parks and open spaces is £15 a head. I'm just curious, I mean, it piques my interest why the cost of sport and leisure facilities is £4.34, and yet if I use a park it's £15. Any indication? I'm just curious.
Michael again?
Yes, I don't have that detail to hand, Councillor Finn. I suspect it's to do with the ability to confirm and count the actual users. So as you can imagine, our parks have various dog walkers and runners, etc. People use it on a very regular basis. So therefore, we don't always have the data accurately to define how many people are actually using it. But certainly the cost per sport and leisure is clear. The amount of members that come through the door. So, Councillor McCabe, apologies. So yeah, just to confirm, it's very much probably about the accuracy of data that we can collect and utilise effectively is very different from parks, as you can imagine, to a sport and leisure facility.
No, that's smashing, Michael. It gives me a wee bit of insight into it. Thank you.
I think Kenneth is a wee.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point in these indicators that in terms of sport and leisure, it's cost per attendance, whereas in terms of parks and open spaces, it's the cost over the whole year. So the money we spend on parks costs £15 per head of population for the whole year.
Yeah.
So that's the difference, or a difference.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Kenneth. That is another difference which I didn't appreciate, but thanks for clarifying that. Final wee one for the minute, convener, still on the same page. Cost of planning and building standards per planning application is £5,390. Again, I don't know whether Kenneth would be able to answer this as well. Is that a cost to us, or is that a cost to developer?
I think Michael's probably best placed to give a full answer on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you through your convener, Councillor McCabe. Clearly, every application that comes forward has a fee charged to it, and we also have the cost of operating the full team and the committees themselves. So we look at the number of applications that come forward, the income generated from that, and the cost of providing that full service. So the cost of providing that full service per application comes out at £5,390. And again, it's just about making sure we are consistent across all local authorities from a benchmarking point of view. So it's a total cost of us delivering applications for the community.
Thanks again, Michael.
Thanks again, Michael. Appreciate it.
Councillor Cook-Frost.
Thank you, convener. Two very different questions. First of all,
that's one, and then we'll come back to you.
No problem. The first one, which concerns me, was page 42, and it's the percentage of child protection planning meetings held within 28 days was 75%. That means that 25% were not. Is there a reason for this? There's bound to be a reason, but what was the reasons, and how quickly was that 100% fulfilled? Because I note that percentage of children on the child protection register with a protection plan is 100%. So just how long exactly did it take to get that?
Thanks. John.
Thank you. There's some further detail given to that on page 63 when you break down into the individual measures. But obviously, the children and families teams have got a continued focus on achieving best practice in that area. And there's a number of factors that contribute to the length of time taken. But they have exceeded the target for Q2 in this report as detailed on page 63.
Right. It was just that 75% jumped out against all the 100% on that page. And that's what I draw my eye to it.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you for that.
Come back to you. Councillor Aitken, did you have a question there? No, sorry. Councillor Patrick.
Yeah, so I'm jumping back slightly again, apologies. It's really just looking at the benchmark figures, and we're talking about cost per member of the population for the parks or attending the leisure facilities. I mean, these are the figures which initially I think the ordinary member of the public actually, in a way, would be interested in, and I think we should almost be considering some ways a council to make sure people are aware of that, because when we as councillors get the usual moan about what am I getting from my council tax, I think it's actually very useful for us the other way around to be explaining, these are what you're getting, and I find these are very interesting figures to dig down into. So I think it's perhaps we're aware of trying to use our, if you like, our publicity about the council, but there's some of these figures which would be quite helpful and quite interesting. What's your money being spent on? And there's actually now some of them are obviously the attending leisure facilities is a choice. You attend or you don't attend, that's fine. But it is interesting, also including things such as what's actually costing to lift up, to take away my bin every year, and how much it costs to dispose of that. Because these are areas in which I think we all get a lot of grumbles, and yet you think about what we're actually paying for these services.
Agree with that,
there is a value there. So it's more a comment that I think something we do as a council should be trying to share the data like that is of clearer interest.
Karen, I think you'd be interested in that.
Yeah, thank you. It is a really good point, and we do have on our website the Falkirk Performs section. So when you do click into that, the data is in there, and you can find it on our website. But I do accept that there's a number of clicks to get to that data, so it's not as obvious to a member of the public as it may otherwise be. So there's maybe something we need to do just about streamlining that and making it much more obvious on our website so that the public can see that. Absolutely.
Totally agree with that. Councillor Forrest.
Okay, thanks. I go back to my other question. Council priority 2, promoting opportunities and educational attainment and reducing inequalities, had the highest proportion of targets which had been achieved or exceeded at 78% of all priorities. That's excellent. It really is, and I'm really pleased at that. But can you explain what work led to this achievement? That might be very broad, but
John. Yeah.
Certainly, thank you. Thanks, Councillor. That priority has got a number of different targets from a number of different services, but I can certainly comment on the ones that are relevant to education. I think there's a vast amount of work that goes in across all of our establishments. Early years, it's a strategy, starts in early years, flows through to primary, and then ultimately the outcomes are judged in secondary. So there's a number of different factors to that. One is about having the right workforce and providing the right support. It's about providing the right curriculum and the right opportunities with the appropriate partners. And crucially, it's about utilising the additional funding that has been received, particularly through the pupil equity funding and the Scottish Attainment Challenge or CEF funding, in order to target areas that are underperforming, where staff or where young people need a bit of extra support. But ultimately, it comes down to tracking and monitoring the progress of each of the 20,000 individuals that are within our system and putting plans in place to make sure that they can meet or exceed their potential. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you for that. very much appreciated.
Any more questions on council plan? Councillor Aitken.
So,
Sorry, I'll try to get you up there. Councillor Aitchison.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. With regards to supporting stronger and healthier communities, this had the highest proportion of targets which had not been met, which was 46% of all priorities. Several of these were related to child and adult protection. The report states the root cause analysis had been undertaken and mitigation would be in place by the 16th of December 24. Can I ask what mitigation has been implemented, and do we have any updated figures on that, please?
Want to take that?
So can I just ask what page you're on, Councillor?
It was under priority 1. Trying to find what page it was. What are I'm doing there? If anybody else has got something else, go ahead and I'll come back to it.
Okay. Councillor McCabe, do you want to go on where we're sorting this a little bit out? No. Councillor Patrick then.
just as looking at the section of the valued sustainable workforce, that's page 96. We're looking at still an increase in the absences for staff. That's excluding the teachers. I can see that's going up. There's a comment that the teachers' sickness is also perhaps slightly skewed because some of the quarters cover the holidays when it's not a nice time to be off sick if you're on your holiday. It indicates that there's going to be a report prepared for the CMT. Have we any idea of timing of that? Because it's quite concerning. I know we've looked at this before and absences still appear to be going up among staff. So it'd be useful to sort of see what the report was and the figures for that.
I'd like to take that one up.
Thank you, Convener, on the absence question. There is certainly an increase in absence, and that's not unique to Falkirk. The CMT paper, we are producing them on a quarterly basis because it is of high importance to us to be able to manage that and help employees attend work. There are growing levels of absence out there in terms of longer term absence, and that's concerning. Some of that is about issues that cross society, because we can see this happening right across the board. When we look at the national statistics, the trend is upwards, unfortunately. But that's not to say we shouldn't be taking actions locally, and that's absolutely what the CMT reports are about the extra actions we can and should be taking to support absence, and we put some additional resource into trying to manage that process.
Ask for clarification. When we're comparing our numbers, are we only comparing with sort of local government situations, or do you have any comparison into the private sector? Because I know as a business owner, I'd be getting very concerned if my absence rates were continue to go up, though I do appreciate that they can be slightly skewed by perhaps maybe a small number of long-term absences where there are very good and difficult reasons.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Our main comparison is local government, because it's like for like terms and conditions of service, which can sometimes also have an impact on the absence levels as well, very often. And I'm very aware a number of private sector companies at statutory sick pay, we have quite well enhanced sickness conditions, and those are national, so it's important that we compare the sort of like for like situation in that case. Now, that's not to say our occupational health providers do work with private sector as well, so we do get information from them, we do get some thoughts about them, how we can better manage absence and how we can also support different types of medical conditions in a better way, and that's all taken on board as well.
Thanks, Karen. Can we go back now to the previous question from Councillor Aitchison?
Which was page 62.
Yeah, if I can come in on that. So I note the comments on page 62, the fact that mitigations have been put in place by the 16th of December, with performance improvement expected by the 31st of March. So I can follow up on that, Councillor Aitchison, and find out what the position is. I suppose I'm just really aware that in the period before Christmas, we had this huge surge in flu outbreak, and actually the pressures on the Health and Social Care Partnership in terms of the providing social care and dealing with delayed discharges, etc., really increased in that period. So I don't know if that date was met, but I'll go back to Gail Woodcock and I'll get an answer for Councillor Aitchison.
Thank you. John?
Maybe just make some further comment, Convener, regarding the information which is, again, is on page 63 regarding child protection referrals. And just to provide assurance that 100% of children who need a child protection plan in place will have one in place. The target that's not been met is in some of those cases, it takes slightly longer than 28 days to establish those meetings and put the plans in place. These meetings are very complex. It involves a number of different people. Sometimes the young people that are concerned are coming from very chaotic backgrounds, and so it is difficult to get everyone round the table who needs to be round the table, family members or parents, or and obviously having to fit in with the schedule and demands on the professionals' diaries that are already committed who need to be there. But I think the reassuring thing about that is that 100% of children that need a plan have a plan in place.
Okay, thanks. Anything else on that? No. Okay, Councillor Onslow.
Thank you, Convener. I'm looking down to page 87 regarding the Council's poor performance in use of non-occurring reserves. Sitting at 33.6% compared to the over 0.5. What are the risks associated with this, given Audit Scotland's advice to reduce the use of this?
Ken?
Thank you, Convener. This is something that we talk about a lot with members when we bring forward the financial strategy, or indeed the budget. And I suppose that if the straightforward question is what the risk is we become financially unsustainable. Because if we continue to rely on non-recurring reserves, these reserves will run out. Maybe in 26, 27, maybe the year after, then we have nothing to plug the budget gap other than savings, council tax, if we're allowed to raise council tax, and fees and charges. So we could quite suddenly find ourselves, or over a period of a couple of years, find ourselves, we don't take the right decisions about not using non-recurring reserves, where we could find ourselves in a position where we have to make really drastic cuts in the services we provide as a council, with I think significant numbers of redundancies in the workforce alongside that. So the purpose of the financial strategy and the proposals that we're bringing forward in the context of the budget are precisely to avoid that position arising, and that's a message we'll be giving very clearly to you all as elected members as we approach the budget on the 6th of March.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Okay, now if we go to Councillor Aitken and then Councillor McCabe, I think we'll maybe have a 5-minute break after that before we go into the next item on the agenda. Well, let's see what we're going through. Councillor Aitken.
It's been that long since I've used that. Page 65 shows that our void rent loss percentage has improved over Q1 and Q2 of 24-25, but it's still above target. What is the financial impact of rent losses?
Karen.
Thank you, Convener. There is indeed an impact because of us losing rent if the void is unavailable to be let. So we have done an awful lot of work on trying to reduce our turnaround of voids. So I think the last report said something like 110 days was our turnaround time. We are now down to around 90 days, and that is improving further. So there is good work ongoing, but you've specifically asked about the rent loss. I don't have the specific data for this, but if I look at the 23-24 period, it was around £2 million of rent loss for that period. So that's why it's absolutely crucial that we work on this and try and reduce our voids as much as possible. And I referred earlier to the pause on non-emergency repairs. That was in part to get the turnaround time of our voids much quicker and get them turned around as quickly as we can. That has helped, and that has helped us to bring down, as has the change to the void standard. And that's all about trying to get properties back into use, but equally helps with our homelessness as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Brown, Councillor McCabe.
Thanks, Convener. I'm just going to return to almost the last two questions, if you don't mind. One is to do with page 87. There's a couple of paragraphs in there, paragraph 2 and paragraph 4, where actually both of them illustrate that we're heading in the wrong direction. One's to do with the use of non-recurring reserves, which we've heard a wee bit about from Kenneth, and the other one is the bridging of the budget gap using savings. We're still not heading in the right direction on either of those. So I suppose my question is, what risks do we have for our budget? And I'm thinking specifically on the one major project that we had a briefing about yesterday, the new Town Hall Theatre complex. What impact will these almost negative or reverse positions have on the whole town centre, the Town Hall Theatre complex, if any? I just realise it's putting added pressure on basically a finite resource.
Convener, if I might come in on that initially. So the report on the Town Hall is going to the executive meeting the 23rd. And whilst the final decision about the budget will come in the future, what we're saying in that report is that we would look to allocate some of the service concessions, so these are our service concession reserve, to pay for the Town Hall. Now, we only have that service concession reserve, we will only have that service concession reserve because we make decisions that bridge the budget gap. So these are decisions about savings. I think critically this year, they're decisions about council tax, because of course this year there's no restriction on council tax, and we don't know if that will apply in future years. And it's also about decisions on fees and charges. So if as a council, we take decisive action this year to reduce our reliance on service concessions, then that money remains available to spend on the Town Hall, on the sport and leisure extensions, which are also being reported to the next meeting of the executive, those at Bowness, the Braes and in Denny, and on other critical capital issues. And I think the school estate, particularly the primary school estate, is going to need significant investment over the next number of years. So if we don't bridge the budget gap, then that money is not available to invest in our communities. If we don't bridge the structural budget gap. And if we, back to my earlier point, it's not simply that we lose the availability of these monies, but actually, in due course, we're going to have to make the decisions about savings and council tax and fees and charges anyway, because that's to use reserves is only a delaying factor in resolving our budget difficulties. It's never a solution, it's only a delay. So the message in the financial strategy and the message in the budget as we go forward will be we need to take decisions now because we want to invest capital in our communities. And ultimately, members will take decisions about how that capital is invested.
Thanks, Kenneth.
Thanks very much, Kenneth. I really appreciate that. And final one, convener, it's just to return to John. It was to do, can't remember what page it was on, John. It was to do with the vulnerable children's plan, whatever you say, they're 100%. What page was that, John? 63, thank you. It's just to yeah, 100% of children with a protection plan in place, which I totally accept. But we then have the child protection planning meetings maybe not reaching the 28 days thing. Can you just give me a wee bit of insight into that, John, about why that difference is there? I mean, is it a case when these kids become vulnerable, they immediately get that? What do they get from that, the meeting, which takes 28 days or further? What do they get from immediately placed on the register? Just my ignorance on it, John, that's all.
John.
Okay, thank you. I think these young people don't just suddenly appear on the child protection register. They'll be well within the sites of services, whether that's working with family support workers, working with social workers, working with pastoral staff and staff in schools. But obviously, when it reaches a level, or if there is a particular incident that takes place, then children and family social work have particular processes that are followed, and it may be necessary at that point to convene a child protection planning meeting. But that will involve a number of different professionals coming around the table. So it could be coming around the table to discuss the situation and to plan for the safety of that child with everyone that is involved and everyone that has a role of that, including parents. Now, if it's a young person that's coming from a very complex, chaotic background, if it's one of our care experienced young people, you want to make sure that you have all the professionals round the table at that time to allow that meeting to take place. But these professionals will be committed as part of their caseload with other young people and other families that they're working with. And that's why sometimes it can take a bit longer. They're always prioritised, but sometimes it can take a bit longer to get them there, to get that actual plan in place. Now, that plan may involve a number of different things. It may involve their care, it may invite their support, it may be about the monitoring, it may be about their placement. So it's not a thing that can, I mean, there are meetings that are pulled very quickly together. IRD meetings, for instance, if there's a particular incident, and the meeting can be pulled together, within 24, 48 hours. But the longer term planning that's required takes a little bit longer. But it will guarantee them or provide them and provide everyone involved with that child assurances about how to keep that child safe and what the council and different services need to put in place or can be exploring in order for that to happen.
No, that's excellent, John. To use a daft analogy, the kids even have 100% plan almost in place. And once the meetings are arranged, it takes them up to 101%, if you like. That's the way it appears to me.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
And just to add one more comment about that, it's not that these just because the plan in place doesn't mean that stuff's not happening in order to keep that child safe. I think that's really important.
Okay, thanks very much for that, John and Brian. We'll now have a 10-minute comfort break and decision to accept. Okay, then I'll put you over to Mr.
Apologies
Perry.
apologies for delaying that break there. Just wanted to double check the decision. So the decision and the recommendation was to note the report, but I believe earlier on there was a request for an update report on, forgive me, I've lost it already. The paragraph 4.6, the sleep limiting behaviours. I think a member had asked for that, so just want to double check the committee are asking for a follow-up short report on that project. And during the discussion on fees and charges, Mr McGuinness indicated that he was going to provide a briefing note on attendances, but the conveners also agreed to put in the decision that this is a subject the committee might want to return to, just in the general, as fees are being increased by the council as part of the decision budget making process. At some point in the future, the committee might want to look at that link between increasing fees and attendance. So it's not something for now, it's just to mark in the minute that that's a possible future topic for the committee to consider. And just double check the committee agree with that.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, present. Sorry. Okay, then, thank you, and we'll have a 10-minute break. Thanks, everybody. Okay, everyone, welcome back. We'll move on to addendum. Agenda item 6, Falkirk Complaints Annual Report 23-24. And can we start perhaps with Councillor Binney? Oh, sorry, we'll get the overview first. Yeah.
Thank you, Convener. As stated at Section 1, the purpose of the report is to advise Committee of the Falkirk Council Complaints Annual Report for 23-24 and of the actions taken to improve complaints handling across all services. Section 3 provides details of the content of Falkirk Council's complaints handling procedure and advises that this is based on the model complaints handling procedure developed by the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, the SPSO, which is what all Scottish local authorities use to develop their complaints handling procedures. Section 3 also explains that the SPSO requires councils to publish a complaints annual report by the end of October each year. The Falkirk Council Annual Report for 23-24, which was published within the required timescales, is attached as Appendix 1. Section 4 details some specific actions taken throughout 23-24 to improve complaints handling, which includes additional support and guidance for staff in dealing with complaints. It also highlights that a new My Falkirk module will be developed for complaints handling in 25-26, that elected members will be consulted on their requirements for these modules, and that temporary arrangements have been put in place in the meantime to improve members' access and information. Committee is invited to note the Falkirk Council Complaints Annual Report 23-24 and the recent improvement actions.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. First question from Councillor Binney.
Thank you, Convener. I'm mindful that the contact centre has recently provided a lot of useful information to the Scrutiny Committee, and that would have taken up some resource. But obviously we are talking in detail about complaints. And I do see that the number of complaints has steadily increased since 2016 up to the present day, and each year it has, there has been, a real increase. I really want to know what's the reasons for this, though. I probably can guess, actually, mainly the reasons for this. But what I am more concerned about is sort of nipping it in the bud, and I do understand that not all complaints are upheld, but if you have more complaints, there's likely ones that might not be upheld. So I don't know, Anne-Marie, if you could, just supply some of the reasons for this. I think some of the councillors will probably know the reasons for this. And regarding going forward, nip it in the bud, what initiatives can we take? What would we do just now, maybe, to stop any further complaints, if that was possible? Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, complaints are increasing, and I think we need to be clear that complaints are not always a problem. Complaints can be a real opportunity for us to learn from, and it's how we use the information that we get in the complaints. The reason for them increasing, we don't know. Some of it will be due to the fact that members of the public, people like ourselves as well, are aware more of complaints procedures and what we can do and how to report complaints. So that could be seen as a success, that we make it easier for people to do that. And over the years, the complaints tend to come from the same areas, but it's to do with any difference or change in service delivery. So if something changes, regardless of what it is, whether it's seen to be for the better, we quite often can drive a change in a number of complaints. It could be to do with housing repairs, it could be to do with waste uplifts, etc. What's important, though, is that the service are analysing the complaints and looking at the reasons for them to see if there's any service delivery improvements that can be made as a result of it to prevent complaints in that area in the future.
If I could just come back in that, I think, though, you know, we're going to have a cliff edge, like, you know, if complaints are increasing every year, at what point, you know, have we learned our lessons? So I think that's maybe an impossible question, might be asking you, Anne-Marie, but, you know, I wouldn't say I'm too happy if every year we're getting more complaints, but how to remedy that is maybe, and I take on board, you know, it's learning lessons and things like that. So maybe going forward, if we can actually find out the nature of complaints, and that there could be one area where there perhaps is a lot more complaints than others, and, you know, we learn that lesson a little bit faster. Would that be possible to have that information, that data?
Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Convener. We do have that data, and we provide that data to the services for them to analyse. They've got access to the Customer First system, but we also produce reports on a weekly, monthly and quarterly basis that provides information about what the complaint is, the types of complaints, what it's about, and we rely on services, our own service do it, other services do it, to look at, is there a theme here, is there a trend, what can we do about that theme and trend, has it been a policy decision that we can't do anything about, and therefore we need to accept that for a short period of time there will be complaints about it, or is it about something around the way we're delivering the service that if we change it we will be able to reduce or eliminate the complaint.
Right, that's fine. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Can we just, Anne-Marie, can we just, complaints were previously, we got a sort of top 10 list of what the complaints were. Is it possible for us to start doing that again so that we know where the problem lies? You're saying that we couldn't really see, you know, where all the complaints, but if we have this top 10 list, we could actually, in scrutiny, have a look at that and dig deeper into the whole problem.
We would certainly be able to give you the service or the division that the complaints are coming from, the nature of the complaint. The current system is not sophisticated enough to give us detailed information beyond the division. That would be where we would rely on the service to give specifics. But yes, we can certainly look at where the top 10 areas are and give some analysis of what were the reasons, what caused it.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. And then perhaps once we find the divisions, we can dig deeper into each individual item that's coming up in each division. Okay, thanks very much. Anyone? Councillor Ake?
Hiya. The number of complaints closed at stage 1 has decreased since 2016-17. Could you tell us what the reasons for this are?
Which table are you looking at? Are you talking about the total closed or within the timescale?
Total number of complaints closed at stage 1 have decreased since 2016-17. Just wondering what the reasons for that are.
So that's either because they have been logged directly as a stage 2 because it's a more complex type of complaint that's more involved and requires more time to answer it, or because for whatever reason it hasn't been responded to within the 5 days and it automatically escalated to a stage 2. And the breakdown of the figures of these is shown in the tables.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a historic hand, Councillor Binney, or you got another question?
Sorry. I don't have another question, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, excuse me, thank you, Convener. Just to clarify through yourself, Convener, I'm just wondering, the Customer First system, in terms of that, has been replaced by the Members Portal, and on that there's a complaints service. I just wondered, for reference purposes, if a constituent writes to 4 councillors, say in my ward, and these 4 councillors raise the same complaint independently of each other, is the system filter that out? Because what would worry me is that these are being double counted, or even from members of the public. You know, if 10 members report, I don't know, a bin falling over or whatever, I just want to know that the figures are fine-tuned and accurate and we're not double counting.
Thank you, Councillor. It depends, I suppose, is the answer. If the elected member has been copied in on the complaint and asked to be included in any response, then it won't be double counted. But if the elected member puts in a separate complaint on behalf of the constituent who has also logged it, we will do our best to pick that up. But the Customer First system is not particularly sophisticated at the moment, which is part of the reason for us replacing it. And then any replacement that we have under My Falkirk, where we'll consult with members on what their requirements of it are to try and eliminate some of that stuff so that it can only be logged once. All the people who need to be notified or involved in any responses, etc., will be included, and therefore we've got one record of the initial complaint.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Yep, thank you. The other additional point that I would maybe ask is that, of course, you'd expect to see the number of complaints increase because the population gets slightly bigger. There's new housing estates, we're building more council houses, etc. So I'm not surprised that it's increasing. I think I'm kind of guessing, comparing to other local councils as a percentage, it's probably quite reasonable, manageable. Would that be fair to say?
It's been difficult to get benchmarking information from other local authorities, and it's something we're currently looking at. Although all local authorities have to produce an annual report, as requested by the SPSO don't gather the information and make it readily available for benchmarking purposes. So Falkirk has joined a subgroup, a networking group, with the intention of being able to do that, to be able to share data and hopefully look at, well, what are you doing that we're not doing that's any better?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a positive move. Thank you very much. Thank you, convener.
Welcome, Jim. Any other questions? Oh, Gordon, sorry. You're so lonely over there yourself.
I know, I'm here all by myself. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll ask one at a time, if that's okay. The report details how each service is dealing with and learning from the complaints individually. How are we ensuring that that lessons learned are shared at a corporate level to learn from each other?
Thank you. There's an internal complaints handling working group, and the meetings are held bi-monthly, I think it is. And it's that group that they discuss the trends, they discuss how they're handling complaints, they discuss where there might be any gaps in training and sharing any learnings at that.
Okay, thank you for that.
And another one, Gordon?
Yeah, I've got another one. In the case of escalated complaints, 50% were upheld or partially upheld. This equates to around 300 cases where something has gone wrong. What has been learned from this? How is it going to be managed going forward? And it'll probably tie in with what I've just asked.
Thanks, through you, convener. Yes, that's exactly it. What we're seeing is an increase in use by services of the management information that's provided to them, where they're discussing it, they're looking at, well, what's the reason for this? Nobody wants to be spending a lot of time dealing with a complaint, so it's in the services and the division's interest to be looking at them and trying to eliminate them in the first place.
Thank you for that.
Is that you?
Can I ask another?
I'll let you go again. I don't see anybody else.
Right. If nobody else is asking, I may as well. Transformation, communities and corporate services have had the most complaints raised to the the SPSO, let's just call it that, out of all Falkirk Council services for 2 years in a row. What are the reasons for this, if you know it, and what are the criteria for a complaint being raised to the SPSO? How is this being managed?
Thank you. I don't know what the specific cases were that went to the SPSO, but as you know, we have responsibility for housing, and there's a link to housing repairs, etc., which is a very public-facing service. So it's possibly to do with that. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
What What are the reasons for that?
The criteria
for the...
Yes, sorry. So the criteria is that they have already been through the full internal process, which is the stage 1 and stage 2. If they're still dissatisfied at stage 2, they then have the right to go to the SPSO. If they go direct to the SPSO, the SPSO will just shut them down and say, you need to contact the local authority.
So this is the end of the...
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for that.
I think Karen wants to come in on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. It was just to clarify that the complaints are indeed, as Anne-Marie suggested, in relation, in the main, not all, but in the main, to housing. And it is, as Anne-Marie says, once they've been through the internal process, tenants have a choice, a right to go to the SPSO. There's no criteria that says you need to, other than go through internal processes, there's no criteria to say that they can't go under certain circumstances. They can choose to go in any circumstances to the SPSO.
Thank you for that. Thanks.
That's it? Yep. Anyway, Councillor McCabe.
Thanks, Convener. Just to follow up on Councillor Forrest and Karen's comments, one of the questions that I had down here is to do with transformation communities and corporate services. What services are involved that lead to these complaints? I had a suspicion that it was probably housing would have been the majority of complaints. You've confirmed that. Other than that, I was concerned, is it the size of the TCCS or whatever? But you've highlighted that it's basically housing, which is the major problem. Just following on from that then, the number of stage 2 complaints, they were closed. They had been 10% in the previous reporting period to 1% this year. However, the percentage of complaints that were closed at stage 2 after escalation has increased. Any idea what the reasons are for the complaints reaching the stage of escalation? Do we know why people are pushing to escalate it even after the stage 2? Is it because we're not providing satisfactory answers, or?
Thank you. The bottom line is because they remain dissatisfied. So the reason, or the reason for closure at stage 2 probably gives us a wee bit more information around whether it's upheld or not. But regardless of us thinking we've given a perfectly reasonable and a perfectly full response, if the member of the public remains dissatisfied, they can escalate it. Or if it's a stage 1 that hasn't been responded to within the timescale, it automatically escalates.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
It's probably in the report here, Anne-Marie, but what is the percentage which are escalated, which are either found against or for the council? It probably is in here, but
it is in here on one of the tables, page 113, we think. So it shows you the outcomes at stage 1, the outcomes at stage 2, and the outcomes of the escalated inquiries. And you see the stage 2 escalated. It's pretty spread. Some of them are upheld, some of them are partially upheld, some not upheld, and some of them are resolved through discussion.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we learn anything from that? Just looking at that table very quickly.
And these figures, you know, when the service deals with a complaint and closes it, they select from a drop down. They've got guidance, but what they believe has happened. Do they believe it's upheld? Do they believe they have partially upheld it? So I don't have any more detail on the reasons for the breakdown.
Okay. Thanks.
Goodbye, thanks. Councillor Binney.
Thank you, Convener. I don't want to nitpick or anything like that, but maybe you could clarify my understanding, you know, especially when we're looking at data on page 109. You know, we're talking about population earlier that it's increased, but we've got complaints received per 1,000 population. In 22-23 was 160,000, but the year after, it looks like the population had dropped actually, but there was an increase in complaints from 22-23. So can you clarify that isn't the number of complaints isn't always to do with the numbers of the population we've got? Maybe I'm not reading that right, but maybe you could clarify that for me. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the third line on the table on page 109 shows that it's complaints received per 1,000 population. So you're quite right. The complaints have increased despite the fact that the population has dropped.
Right. Thank you very much for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lorna. Anyone else? Any other questions at all? Being none? Okay. Can I thank all the councillors for their questions? Sorry.
So just as your closing convener, sorry, just to double check the decision of the committee, I think you did ask, so obviously not the report, but you had asked for a report on a top 10 of the most common types of complaints for the period 2016-17 through to 24-25. So that you could look at that and see if you can drill down in future meetings. So that will go in their own action log, and I can speak to Karen and Maria about when a suitable time for the report to come would be.
Okay, yep, thank you. So if that's all the business, I want to thank all the councillors for appearing, and thanks very much to the officers for their answers, quite deep answers in some cases, but thanks for your time. And good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you, convener, as well. Thank you.